What happens when a royal sits down for one of the most prestigious interviews in America, only to walk out in fury? Prince Harry's highly anticipated 60 Minutes interview with Anderson Cooper began with warmth and composure. But as questions deepened, the tension cracked wide open. This wasn't just an interview, it was a slow, burning collision between a seasoned journalist and a defiant royal, spiraling into one of the most unforgettable walkouts in television history. The room was calm, understated, and intimate, just like every 60 Minutes setup. No grand stage, no studio audience, just two chairs, a coffee table, and the unmistakable quiet of serious journalism. Anderson Cooper greeted Prince Harry warmly, extending his hand with a respectful smile. "Harry, thank you for being here," Anderson began, his tone carrying both gravity and hospitality. Harry nodded curtly, his posture relaxed, but with a certain stiffness that hinted at the storm underneath. "Well, I suppose the world expects me to explain myself, so here I am." Anderson chuckled lightly, steering the moment back to ease. "That's the beauty of conversations like this. People get to hear directly from you." The first few minutes unfolded smoothly. Anderson asked about Harry's life in America, his projects, the transition from royal duties to private ventures, and the challenges of raising a family outside the crown's shadow. Harry's answers, though, already carried a sharper edge than expected. "America has been tolerable," he said, his voice tinged with arrogance. "At least here, I don't have to bow to outdated rituals or pretend my family understands me. It's liberating to finally live in a place where people treat me as special, not just a spare part of a system." Anderson adjusted in his chair, unfazed. He had interviewed presidents, generals, and celebrities under fire. Ego and pride were no strangers to him. He leaned forward slightly. "But isn't there also comfort in tradition, a sense of stability, perhaps?" Harry smirked. "Comfort for whom? For the ones sitting on golden thrones? Tradition is just a cage with better wallpaper. My family clings to it because it hides the cracks." The tension in the room shifted ever so slightly. Anderson noticed the sudden flash of defiance in Harry's eyes, but his own tone stayed calm, steady. "That's an interesting way of putting it. And yet, millions still admire the monarchy, seeing it as a symbol of unity and resilience. What do you say to them?" Harry's reply came swift, dismissive. "I say they're infatuated with a fairy tale. They don't see the machinery behind it, the manipulation, the silencing, the control. They celebrate the crown, but they don't care who bleeds for it." Anderson gave a small pause, his journalist instincts sharp. He recognized the early signs of escalation. But part of his role was to let the truth unravel, even if it grew uncomfortable. He shifted gently to a different angle. "Let's talk about family," he said softly. "You've spoken about Meghan and your children with deep emotion before. How is life as a husband and father away from the institution?" Harry's jaw tightened, though he smiled faintly. "Life as a husband and father is exactly as it should be, mine. And frankly, the press has no right to dissect it, nor does the monarchy. I protect what's mine. That's more than they ever did for me." Anderson nodded but didn't let the arrogance slide. "But when you speak publicly, whether in interviews, documentaries, or your book, you open the door for questions. Do you feel there's a contradiction between demanding privacy while also sharing intimate details on your own terms?" Harry's eyes flickered with irritation. "That's a tired argument. Privacy doesn't mean silence. It means control. I decide what the world deserves to know, not the other way around. If people can't grasp that, then they're not worth addressing." The shift was undeniable now. What started as an engaging interview was tilting toward confrontation. Anderson, however, remained composed, even offering a half smile. "That's certainly one way of putting it. Some might say that sounds selective." Harry leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Selective? No, it's called freedom. Something you as an American should understand better than most." The words hung in the air like a challenge. The warmth of the opening had evaporated, replaced by an icy tension that made even the quietest creaks of the set sound loud. Anderson gave a slow nod, jotting down a note on his pad, though his expression remained neutral. Inside, though, he knew this was no ordinary interview. This was a powder keg, and Harry was holding the match. The stillness in the room was deceptive. Cameras rolled quietly, crew members barely dared to breathe, and in the center sat two men, one seasoned in the art of journalism, the other simmering with defiance. The tension was now visible, like heat rising from asphalt. Anderson Cooper leaned forward slightly, his tone still measured, calm, but his questions sharpened just enough to pierce through Harry's polished armor. "You've spoken about your struggles with the institution," Anderson began, "but I want to ask about something deeper. Your mother, Princess Diana, became a global symbol, not only because of her role, but because of the way she connected with people. Do you feel that you carry her legacy?" For a moment, Harry's lips pressed together in a thin line. The question touched a raw nerve, and his response came fast, clipped. Legacy is a word the media loves. You put my mother on pedestals, you tore her down, and then you expect me to carry that weight as though it's a crown I should be grateful for. I am not my mother's replacement, and I won't let anyone use her name to measure me. Anderson nodded slowly, keeping his composure. Fair point, but many see you as continuing her spirit of independence, of challenging tradition. Isn't that something you embrace? Harry scoffed, leaning back in his chair with folded arms. You all want to turn me into a symbol because it makes for better headlines. I'm not here to be a candle in the wind for anyone's nostalgia. My mother's memory belongs to me, to my family, not to the public, and not to journalists trying to spin a story. The words were sharp, almost accusatory. Anderson absorbed them without flinching, his decades of experience carrying him through. All right, Anderson said softly. Then let's pivot. Meghan, the two of you have spoken at length about the difficulties you faced. Some critics argue that your marriage pulled you further from your family. How do you respond to that? Harry's eyes flashed with irritation. Critics? You mean the same people who have never met her, who write columns from behind desks, pretending they understand what marriage means? Meghan saved me from a suffocating institution. She didn't pull me away, she freed me. Anyone who can't see that is blind. Anderson kept his voice even, though Harry's hostility was now undeniable. But when you describe her as saving you, doesn't that imply that without her you'd still be trapped? Doesn't that give her an almost singular power over your decisions? Harry smirked, shaking his head. Singular power? No, it's called partnership. Something most journalists like you can't comprehend because you're too busy dissecting other people's relationships instead of living your own. The sting was direct, but Anderson maintained his professional mask, refusing to bite back. Instead, he scribbled another note and pivoted again. You've also been open about raising your children in America. How is fatherhood different here than it might have been back in the UK? Harry exhaled sharply, as though the question itself bored him. It's simple. Here, my children get to be normal. They're not props for photographers. They're not pawns in some royal chess game. And unlike back home, they have a father who protects them. Anderson tilted his head. So you don't believe your family would have protected them? Harry's tone was almost mocking. Protected them? The monarchy doesn't even protect its own heirs, let alone the so-called spares children. My children would have been sacrifices on the altar of tradition. That's not family, that's exploitation. Anderson gave a small sigh, his patience tested but still intact. Some might argue that by stepping into documentaries, books and interviews like this one, you're also putting them in the spotlight, just under your own terms. How do you reconcile that? Harry leaned forward now, his voice growing harder. I don't need to reconcile anything. I decide what's best for my family. The media doesn't, the crown doesn't, and certainly not people like you. The room chilled instantly. Anderson's jaw flexed, but his tone stayed calm. It seems every question about accountability, Harry, you redirect back to control. Do you think there's room for balance? Harry's smirk widened, almost smug. Balance is a myth. You either control your story or it controls you. I refuse to be a victim of narrative anymore. That's something you'll never understand because your entire career depends on poking at other people's lives. For the first time, Anderson's brow furrowed, the faintest sign of irritation flickering across his otherwise steady demeanor. He let the silence stretch, watching Harry revel in it. Finally he spoke, his tone deliberate. Let's look ahead then. What do you see for yourself in the future? What does life look like for Prince Harry 10 years from now? Harry chuckled under his breath, but it wasn't warm, it was condescending. The future? The future is mine. Not something I need to lay out like a press release for public consumption. I'll do what I want when I want, and people can either accept that or choke on their expectations. Anderson tapped his pen against his notepad once, twice, slowly. The calm mask was still there, but the weight behind his eyes betrayed the storm building. He shifted slightly in his chair, exhaled, and leaned back. Interesting, Harry, he said quietly, almost to himself. Then he looked back at Harry. You know, I've interviewed people at their highest and lowest points. Presidents under scandal, soldiers returning from war, families broken by tragedy. They all shared one thing, humility. Do you think there's a risk that yours has been lost along the way? Harry stiffened, the smugness momentarily slipping into a scowl. Humility. Don't lecture me about humility. I've lived through things you couldn't survive. If I come across as unapologetic, it's because I've earned the right to be. Humility is for those still begging for approval. I don't need anyone's. The words echoed heavier than anything before. The air in the room thickened, a kind of silence that felt suffocating. Anderson gave a slow nod, his voice still calm but edged now with steel. That's one way of seeing it. The cameras kept rolling, but everyone in the room felt the same thing. This interview was teetering on the edge of collapse, and the fall was coming fast. The quiet of the set had turned heavy, almost oppressive. The crew, trained to remain invisible, now felt trapped in the tension building between the two men. Every exchange chipped away at the polished surface of civility, leaving cracks wide enough for the audience at home to feel through their screens. Anderson Cooper adjusted slightly in his chair, his pen resting motionless against the notepad. His voice remained steady, but there was a hint of weariness creeping in. "Harry," he said carefully, "you've spoken about control, about carving your own path, but critics have pointed out that many of your public appearances, your book, the Netflix series, interviews like this one, still revolve around the monarchy. How do you respond to people who say you're trying to escape an institution while never really letting it go?" Harry gave a sharp laugh, short and biting. "Critics, always critics. They cling to their illusions, desperate to keep the crown polished. Let me be clear. I talk about it because it shaped me, because it scarred me. The monarchy isn't something you just walk away from. It's stamped into your skin. If I choose to expose its flaws, that's my right. If people can't handle the truth, that's their problem." Anderson raised an eyebrow, his calm expression unbroken. "But you've also profited from those flaws. Do you see the contradiction there?" Harry leaned forward now, eyes narrowing. "Profited? Tell me, Anderson, is it profit when you claw back pieces of your life that was stolen from you, or is it survival? I took back my story, and if people want to pay to hear it, so be it. Better they hear it from me than from the tabloids you people love to quote." The dismissive tone carried an edge that even Anderson's legendary patience couldn't smooth away. He kept his voice level, but it was tighter now. "I don't quote tabloids. I ask questions the public wants answered. There's a difference," Harry smirked. "Semantics. At the end of the day, you're still digging, still feeding the public appetite for drama. You're no different than the rest of them." The insult hung in the air, and this time Anderson didn't smile it away. His eyes flickered with something sharper, though his voice remained calm. "You've been very critical of the press, yet here you are again, sitting in front of cameras. Is it fair to say you want the attention, just on your terms?" Harry's lips curled into a mocking half-smile. "Ah, the old trap question. Attention, fame, celebrity. Do you people ever get tired of recycling the same narrative? I'm not here because I want your attention. I'm here because you begged for mine. Let's not pretend otherwise." The arrogance in his tone sent a ripple through the room. A producer in the back shifted uncomfortably. Even the faint hum of the lights seemed to grow louder. Anderson sat still, absorbing the jab, his composure intact but visibly fraying. Anderson leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "You've spoken often about wanting privacy, about protecting your family. Yet every time you sit here, the cycle continues. Doesn't that undermine your own message?" Harry's laugh was sharp, almost cruel. "There it is again, the privacy paradox. You think you're clever pointing it out, don't you? Let me make it simple. I decide when to speak, not you. That's not hypocrisy, it's control. Something your industry hates because it means you can't dictate the terms." The tension in the studio thickened, pressing against everyone present. Anderson's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. Control is one thing, but when that control turns into constant contradiction, people stop believing the story. Harry tilted his head, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Believing the story? That's rich, coming from a network that sells narratives like candy bars. Spare me the lecture on consistency. At least I'm not pretending to be neutral while cashing checks off other people's misery." For the first time, Anderson's expression hardened. The familiar calm cracked, just for a second, replaced by something steely. The interview had shifted from conversation to confrontation, and everyone in the room could feel it.